Hey, good evening, and welcome to the Comics Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club for the month of February 2021. We made it. We're in the future. It's awesome. We've got a cool book this month, and a cool creator, and ooh, it's shiny. You can see it shiny on the screen. It's Hypnotwist and SCARLET by Starlight. And they're both by Gilbert Hernandez, and Gilbert is right there. Hello, Gilbert.
Hello, folks.
How
Hello,
you doing,
Brian.
man? Welcome to the show. Welcome to it. My first question always is, because I love this question, of all the things you could be doing, right? You could be making music, you could be doing film, you do comics. Why comics? What is it about comics that lights you on fire, that makes your soul bright?
I believe I was born to do them. Since I was a little kid, just looking at comic books and just being fascinated by what I was looking at and wanting to draw it. I was tiny. My first comic book, I was 5 years old. It's called Spaceman because I just thought, I'm going to make up a space, but I had no idea what to do. I know I just did a couple of crude drawings and that was it. That's my comic, But I don't know. I like waking up in the morning and then getting ready to work and do a comic book because I'm by myself. There's nobody telling me what to do, not to do. It's simply I get just unleash everything, from my, diseased brain, and put it on the page. That's why I do so many different comics from different, like I'll do adult comics and I'll do rated R comics and I'll do, mass audience comics. But
yeah.
I lean toward the darker stuff, but just because I have a crazy imagination.
Yeah, I love it. So you remember your first comic, Spaceman? Like it was like 4 pages long or something?
Yeah, it was just like lined paper from school, and just folded over. And I did it because, we came from a big family, and it was really to keep us quiet, because it was at first 4 brothers running around the house going crazy. And then my older brother Mario, he could draw a little bit, and he was into comics, so Mom said, draw a comic book, and then, Gilbert will draw it too, and draw one too. So he drew a Superman comic. He started drawing a Superman comic, and I was like, I don't want to do Superman or Batman. I want to do my own. Had a big ego back then too, So I did Spaceman. I just remember, the only thing I remember was called Spaceman. He's standing on the moon. And then there was I just skipped the rest of the story, and just in one page, I just draw just a huge face of him smiling. And that was it. That was as much as Spaceman that I did.
I see. Okay. That's great, though. That's awesome.
Yeah. And so from then on, it was like Spider-Man meets, Dracula or something. The comics like that. I couldn't draw for hell, but it was, back. I would just make up the Fantastic Four. Because every once in a while when you're a kid, you see comics, and then every once in a while there's one that changes your life. Every few years. Well, the first one that changed both our lives, my brother Mario and I, was the first Fantastic Four annual. With the Submariner, and it had, it had this epic story. It was longer than a comics, like 30-some pages, and then it had reprints, in the back, the origin of, the Fantastic Four, and then in the middle it had full pages of their foes, their evildoers, and I was just fascinated by that comic. I go, this is big. This is like a movie, So I started thinking bigger about comics, and obviously at the same time, Jack Kirby and Stan Lee did too, because Fantastic Four after that got bigger and bigger, and just amazingly, just took us to places like every month we were just like, whoa, these guys just keep going,
Yeah. So you were already reading FF before the annual came out.
Reading, I'd seen it. I remember the day my older brother brought home Fantastic Four #1.
Yeah. Okay.
I didn't read them because I was just antsy, I was just wanting to go outside and screw around, but I would look at them and I would tell it. And what you do is this. I understand a lot of cartoonists do this when they're really small. They don't want to read it. They just want to look at the pictures and make up their own story.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of how I learned storytelling, by looking at the pictures, the layouts, and Kirby's wonderful art, and making up the story. Because once I went back later to read them, I go, I like my story better. Yeah. That's little kids. What are you going to do?
It's interesting because I don't really see a ton of Kirby in your work.
No, but it was just his work ethic and just wanting to please people in a big way. You could just see it in his art, especially when he went nuts in the mid-'60s with Fantastic Four and Thor. it was, he just wanted to please us. We're getting big here. Yeah, Superman's doing that, but Thor's doing this, and it's just gotten bigger and bigger. And then you had Ditko doing Spider-Man, which was goth. People don't think of Spider-Man as goth, but those early issues are very goth, and he was very dark because he was doing the monster stories, Amazing Adult Fantasy, and they were all dark and crosshatchy and stuff. Yeah. And I loved that. So I liked the Jekyll and Hyde type aspect of Marvel Comics, and so I'm closer to the Ditko goth style. But Kirby was always blew my mind every issue. Wow.
Yeah. You said that was the first comic that blew your mind. What was the next one?
And then later, it was probably later in the Fantastic Four, it was This Man, This Monster. The famous. You've heard, everybody's heard these stories. Yeah. And then the comics changed. Then it was like, wow, this is really going somewhere. There's probably a lot of them down the line. But I'm not remembering them now. But every year or so, maybe probably every year, you just see a new new progress with a Marvel comic. It's terrific. Yeah. And I guess the next really big change was underground comics. Mm-hmm. Now I was too young to read them, but I'd heard about them, and I'd seen spot illustrations in old fanzines. So it's talk about R. Crumb or S. Clay Wilson, Right. And I would see it this looks kind of good. And my older brother goes, no, you don't want to see these. These are really, really nasty, and we can't get these in the house. So he'd have to sneak them into the house. And I took a look at Zap. Which number was it? So number 2, I think, with the Boing cover. Yeah. Oh, I was like, this is evil. I'm going to hell for looking at this. I'm going to hell for it being in the bedroom. We're all going to die. But naturally, as a kid, I was maybe 14. No, I was probably maybe 12. And I remember looking at it and just, I'll tell you what, my first underground experiences, I went with some friends, and we went to the San Diego Zoo. This is like 1970-ish, around there. We went there and we're leaving, and there was a bunch of hippies. I go, wow, real hippies. And they're all sitting around, they're getting high. You can smell the pot and stuff, but they're selling underground comics and stickers and posters and stuff. And I remember looking over at the underground comics thinking, wow, what is that? Wow. Because they're kind of messy, spread out, so I could see the covers. I go, this is awesome. I want one of those. And it said adults only. And I was like, I don't want to even try. So I remember a hippie girl walked up to me, and I didn't know anything about drugs then. And her eyes were so dilated. That's what I noticed. But she was really nice, and just goes, hi, can I help you? And I'll take one of those stickers. And it was a glow in the dark peace sign. But I was really looking at the comics, Yeah. But and then I came home later and told my brother about it. He goes, oh yeah, those they sell them here in town, but they're like in the dirty section, the dirty magazine section and stuff. I'm like, well, that's good, right? And well, anyway, I just got his interest, and he said, okay, I'll buy one, I'll bring one home, and it blew my mind. Like I said, I felt sick for a week. I thought, this is just, oh man, what's happening to the world, and then later on, I couldn't get enough, Yeah. So that was a big jump. Even though I still like, the Marvel DC comics, I still liked them. Every once in a while, you go over to, but it wasn't that big a leap looking at the black and white crazy stuff, because my older brother was buying Hot Rod cartoons. Okay. Right, it was a Hot Rod, Cycle Tunes, and all that stuff, and it had a similar look to Underground. Mm-hmm. So when I saw the Undergrounds, I thought it was looser and crazier, but it was still minded me of those comics.
Yeah, well, there's a lot more open sex in them though than you're.
Yeah, well. 12, right?
Right, yeah, no, exactly. Oh, that's funny. The first issue of Love and Rockets was 1981. How old were you then?
The old black and white one?
Yeah, the old black and white one.
22, I think. I try to forget.
Yeah. What made you guys think that you could do a comic?
We didn't. We just did it. It was more,
right, okay.
Because we grew up with fanzines. There was these crude fanzines out there, guys making up their own superheroes, their own comics, and I didn't think they were accomplished. I didn't think they're as good as mainstream, but I thought they're doing it and they're having a good time. Yeah. You could tell. You could just get the vibe. They were having a real good time. So I really got into fanzines at the time. My brother subscribed to the Rocket Blast Comic Collector, and it was just basic ads and stuff, but it would just brought me in all this world of fandom that was like, everybody's into stuff. Wow. And there's all kinds. You said Marvel, DC, because you never saw Marvel and DC stuff together. in those days, and you didn't see, Robert Crumb and Mad Magazine and Old Tarzan by Bern Hogarth in the same place.
Right.
So that's what blew my mind. That's why I thought, this is great. This is the comics world, and I'm part of it. I want this. I didn't know how to be part of it then, when I was a young kid. But so by the time we got to Love and Rockets, we basically didn't have a future. It was like, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know. We like to draw comics for ourselves, and older brother Maya just said, I think we can get a comic book published, printed, fanzine. We thought, okay, but we're thinking fanzine, 1972. We weren't thinking, no, you got to have more going on, if you want to get noticed or whatever. And because that was a time, and what inspired me actually was ElfQuest and Cerebus, because they were out doing it. They were doing their own thing. They didn't care. It's not Marvel. It's not DC. They were doing their own thing. I thought, well, we can do something like that, something, what they're doing. And so it just kind of fell together because we had nothing else to do. Just like a classic rock band, they had nothing to do, and you just start doing it, So, but here's the big surprise. It's like when I saw the artwork from my brother Jaime, doing the Maggie and Hopi stuff, we were like, well, when did he learn to draw like this? He always drew well. He always was a very good artist, but it was more like, no, this is there. This is something, And so we just put all our hopes in people liking it for his art, and that's how we got noticed in the early issues. Was just how well he drew and his decisions. I'll do a cover with a dinosaur on it, and one of the girls will be a cave woman or something. Something simple. Classic fanzine stuff. But he drew it so well, it really caught people's attention. So that's really the reason Love and Rockets got noticed. The first times. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I have a feeling that you also had something to do with it, but.
And I was a backup feature, but I didn't mind. Ditko was the backup feator in those Kirby monster books, Tales to Astonish.
That's true. No, it's true.
It was the big Kirby monster story. 3 chapters is great, and then Ditko would have the creepy, dark stories in the back. And so I thought, I'll be the Ditko. I'll be the creepy guy, and I still am.
Yeah. So your first batch of stories with Palomar were very different than any other comics that were kind of coming out at the time, in that they're about people, right? They're not about action, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Almost every other comic was action first. Mm-hmm. How did you settle on that as what you wanted to do?
When it got to that point, it was their third issue of Rockets, and Jaime was already getting the attention with his stories, using outer space motifs and this sort of classic stuff. And then, but then he emphasized the punk scene that was just not shown in comics. And the music scene, the music scene was never well represented in comic books. It just it was kind of an alien world. It was like, what is it? A 7-string guitar? What is this? What's he playing there? There's just zoing zang. It was like I didn't relate to it in comics, but we like rock. We listen to the radio and stuff. So I just started thinking like, well, I can't do the same thing. I didn't feel right. So I was more into thinking. I thought more in the way of movies. Like, oh, what if why don't I just put down a story that's like a movie I would like to see? Because I was a big fan of films, and I still am. And foreign movies, they're a little more adventurous. They're a little more concerned with different places in the world and different people. So that's what I was thinking of. And I just thought, well, I was never confident with my writing as far as like making up stuff. Like, okay, here's the planet Zuba, and it's going to have this stuff in it. And then, how people have these Bibles, that they create their series on. Sure. I didn't really have that in me. I liked it, when I read it from other people, but I didn't have that in me. So I just thought, just do stories from the past that you remember, because there were so many things growing up. All kids, you're fascinated by things you don't understand, but you're not always scared of them. They're interesting. Right. Basically, and then you hear scary stuff and you're like, oh, but that's cool, so I decided to put that stuff into place, and I just thought I didn't it was pure laziness. I go, I don't want to draw my neighborhood. I'll make up a town so I can make up everything. And that's both my curse and my strength. I have a super crazy imagination. So I'd rather use my imagination than study. You know, when I have to do reference, like I draw a motorcycle accurately or a car, it's a nightmare for me, you know, because I want to get it, you know, done right, and I want to get it done, you know. But then I realized, well, but if I get the car done right, I got to get the rest of the drawings right, you know. So I tried not to do that so much, so I just decided I will make up Palomar. I'll try to make it look like it really exists, more or less, you know. Yeah. So that was it, really. I didn't want to draw the real life. I wanted to have a blend of, you know, real type people, you know, their characters, and then living in a world that doesn't exist, but it might feel like it does.
Sure.
I don't know. You know, that's the thing.
Yeah, it's interesting because you started that off with I'm not any good at building a world, and yet it's what you did, right?
Well, I think that's the weird thing, because you tell yourself you can't do it, right? So it kind of has to sneak up on you in a way. Sometimes, a lot of times, an artist will block things that they're good at because they're just so neurotic about, I don't know, it's not going to go right. I don't know if I want to do this. This is going to take me years, or I don't know if I'm up to it. And then if you're lucky, it comes around and goes, yeah, you can, and you can do something else. It's just you skip the roadblock. You just skip the block. So that's the young man's game. It's getting tougher. You know, as you get older, it gets a little tougher. But
sure.
Young people, just like when they start rock bands in their teens, they're just wild. They just go nuts. You know, they're not paying attention to what they're supposed to do until they're 20. We got to make a record, you know, that kind of thing. I mean, I'm just speaking generalities, of course, but it's kind of like that just, you know, youth. And I just kind of,
but you know, I mean, here you are at 64. Is that
just
right?
turned 64.
Yeah, and we still love you. That was the Beatles reference. Sorry.
64, 1964.
But no, my point is here you are at 64, and you're still an incredibly prolific cartoonist. You're doing all of this work, and you know, it seems like people like it to me. You know, I own a comic book store. People like your work. People like what you do. So I don't know. You've had a 40-year career, man. That's and it's not showing any signs of ending, right?
As far as, I mean, if my brain and hand holds out, you know, I'll keep going. The only time, and I've talked to other cartoonists who have, you know, do comics continuously. When is it over? They always ask, when is it over? And we all just go, when either our brains and bodies fail, or the publisher says it sells so bad we can't publish this anymore. Yeah. That's the only time you quit, really, because I live on you putting my imagination down on paper. You know, I need something to do. I'm not a great loafer anymore. I used to be a great loafer when I started. Yeah. Oh boy, draw. Oh, I'll draw next month. You know, now it's like I have to draw every day, something, you know.
Yeah. You've got a really great relationship with your publisher.
Gary?
Well, yeah. No, but I mean, I think it's you were one of, I mean, maybe 15 cartoonists that I can think of that can literally publish almost anything that you want to, right? Like
there was a period of that. I don't know if I could do that now so much.
Yeah.
There was a little bit I could do that, but once they found out that my comics don't sell, that's when that marriage was over.
Okay.
Or sell well. They didn't sell as well as people think. People really think that we sell super well because we're written about. You know, that makes sense. You know, but it's work to get something out there. You know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can just say as an individual store, I'm just one store, but we sell a lot of your work. So I assumed that was happening other places too.
I guess so, but I think that's the limit. You know, it'll sell good at your store and certain stores, because it's still. I'm finding out still after almost 40 years that it's somewhat in some stores. You know, it's still being sold in the back X-rated section of the comic store.
Really?
The closets and stuff. Yeah, that's what I hear anyway.
Right.
I should be proud of that.
I guess. You've got some great stores there in Vegas. There are some really good stores out there.
Yeah, my two favorites are Alternate Reality, which is a Ralph store, but I really like a Jim store, Cosmic Comics, because it's those great classic. Everything's in it. You know, it's like you just turn your head like, oh, they're the Undergrounds. Oh, I was disappointed when he moved to a bigger place because he had before he had the small classic, hippie comic book store where it has everything, and you have to search for what you want, and you would find it and find other things, old comics flopping over the racks and stuff, and you go, oh, from 1968, this comic, So it was great, but it's still good. That's my favorite store.
That's nice. Do you get to the comic shop on a regular basis? I mean, maybe not now with COVID.
Not now. No, I slowed down because I was collecting a lot of stuff like, 10 years ago or so. No, even more, 15 years ago. There was a lot of old comics reprints. They're doing archives. They're doing that kind of stuff. Those big black and white things that were black and white DC or Marvel. They were doing a lot of that stuff. And Fantagraphics and Dark Horse and IDW, and they were putting out comic strip reprints and stuff, and that's what I go for. I'm a big Dick Tracy fan. I collect everything, but now that's starting to slow down. I think they're almost done with Dick Tracy. That's the only thing I'll be collecting. So I think I've got all the comics I want. So I go there to browse and buy instead of search. I don't search anymore. Jaime just bought me the last comic I was looking for the last 40 years. And
what was that one?
He found it. Little Archie number 17.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a comic book I always loved when I was a little kid. For some reason, we had a lot of comics as a kid, all kinds, kid comics, westerns, war, Betty and Veronica, Marvel, DC. We had everything but romance comics because we were boys, we weren't interested. But it just, I don't know, it just was, I lost my train of thought.
Little Archie.
Oh, the Little Archie, yeah. It just was one of those comics that I just loved. Because it was kind of a strange comic to me because it didn't match the other Archie styles, those other kiddie ones. Yeah. There was darker stories in it, and the art was, because I found out the artist, Bob Balling, was a student of Bern Hogarth. So he had all this brushwork and lines and stuff and kind of over rendering. So that was different for Archie. So anyway, I like the comics, and then for some reason, once our comics got too tattered, Mom would throw them away. Just like, okay, they're old comics. But that was when we were young. She got wind of, like, after 1964, I think, or 63, Spider-Man number 5. She was like, all right, no more throwing comics away. Only because they're worth keeping. They're in good shape and, that kind of thing.
Because you said earlier that Mario brought home a copy of FF1.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that Mom threw out your copy of FF1?
No, luckily once he started getting, like, she could see that he was into it and just saving them and putting them in a box and stuff. She saw that as a good hobby because anything that would keep our voices down and us running through the house, basically, that's why we learned to draw too. It was just Dad was like, oh yeah. When are they going to ever stop? No, there's 5 boys, running around like maniacs. So they would put paper on the ground and give us crayons, and we would draw. We'd actually all lay on our stomachs, and just draw something, And I remember learning how to draw a nose then. I didn't know how to draw a nose, I remember. And my dad goes, well, he drew a triangle. And he goes, that's a nose. I went, oh, it's good, but it looks more like a scarecrow, And then my mom just said, oh, well, just put these 2 dots here. Especially on women, you put the 2 little dots to make their noses look like girls. And that was oh wow, there's a method to this to do it right, and simply that a kid could do, So that's how that started, just shutting us up, comic books, monster movies, and drawing.
Yeah. And what do you? I don't think I asked Jaime this when I talked to him like 2 months ago. Mm-hmm. What do your parents think of your career? Do you are they I assume they're proud, right? That you're doing a thing that you love and making a living.
Well, Dad died when we were kids, but before he did, he would see what I was drawing, and he disapproved of it. Okay. He didn't discourage me, but he was just like, why do you draw that? I went through this phase of those Myron Fass was that weird, reprints of 50s comics, Eerie publications. Publications. And there's those weird and witches' tales, and they just had these gory covers. I couldn't figure out how they got away with those gory covers, but they would do old reprints in there and add blood to everything. Yeah. So as a little kid, I was like, this was right before Undergrounds. I go, you can't do that. I mean, I knew Creepy and Eerie could be kind of bloody and violent, but this was like sick. And I thought, you can't do that. So anyway, I got inspired to draw sick horror, and I'm like in the 5th grade, I guess, or 4th grade, and I'm just drawing really crude stuff, but disembodied heads and swords and people's backs, and just like feet are chopped off and they stuffed them in his mouth, just gruesome, stupid stuff. But it just made me laugh. And he saw me drawing something like that. He goes, "Wouldn't you draw something good? Like, this is good." And he goes, No, something nice, like just like the ocean or a lake and trees and stuff. I was embarrassed because I couldn't conceive of drawing that.
Sure, yeah.
So I didn't even think of, that's weird. I never even think of copying a photograph. I never thought of that. I thought, I have to know how to do it, already. So anyway, he did have a couple of words about it, but he didn't discourage it. He said, "Yeah, keep drawing." But he was more like, why are you into that stuff? But see, Mom, she was a comic book fan since the 40s. So it was okay for us to have comics. I mean, it was okay because she liked them. Once the Marvel comics started going with the continuity and stuff, she got involved and she really liked them. So it was okay at first with Mom. She was proud of us that we found jobs and that we had something to do. And she liked that it was something that we believed in. My brother and I, we believe in what we're doing.
Yeah.
Has a lot to do with the 40 years. We believe in it. So she at first, but then I started getting pretty raunchy right away.
Right.
And it got too raunchy for her. She just goes, I don't want to read it anymore. She told us, she gave me a stack of the comics I gave her, and she says, I don't want these,
Yeah.
That was it. I felt sad, but I wasn't heartbroken, only because, Mom, figures. Something Mom would do. She threw away my Mars Attacks cards. This is a classic story. I collected Mars Attacks, the original, going in, 1967 when they came out, because we were able to swipe them from a grocery store. They had a card machine. They had baseball cards and Mars Attacks. And we look at the Mars Attacks imagery, and we're like, "This is crazy! We got to get them." But you'd have to pay 2 cents because you get the card and the bubble gum.
Yeah.
And I didn't. And I go, but every time this is really dumb for me. Every time we would crank it out, and it would either be a Mars Attacks card or a baseball card, and we'd get the baseball cards and throw them away. Now this is 1967. Baseball cards in 1967.
Sure.
You'd have a Mickey Mantle and throw it away.
Sure.
You know how much a Mickey Mantle baseball card is?
Right.
You'd get a Don Drysdale. You'd get Willie Mays if you were lucky. If you got a Willie Mays, that one we did know. So only one kid had got Willie Mays. But there was anyway. So now I think of we got rid of the baseball cards because but we wanted the Mars Attacks card. So so we figured out, and since a lot of the kids we knew were hoods or future hoods, they'd go like, "I know how to get those cards out of there for free." I'm like, "Oh, really?" So he just got this little wire. He looked around, and he just pulled the side stuck it through the slot, pulled it out, and he pulled out a whole card. Wow. And so we became criminals by then, so collecting Mars Attacks cards. But because the machine was tilted to where the cashier couldn't see us,
Right.
And so so I collected. There was 55 cards in the set, and I didn't get 2. There's 2 I just did not get, and then they took the machine away because they got wise. I thought
it was getting stolen from all the time.
Yeah. It's like, wait a minute, there's no Mars Attacks cards. So anyway, I collected them, right, and I kept them in a little stack, and I put them in the closet, like this, and I would set it there so nothing's gonna. I didn't think I would need to hide it in my underwear drawer, which I should have done, because one day I came home from school and they're gone. And I looked around, I go, "Those cards aren't there." And I asked my brother, and he goes, "I think Mom was cleaning today." And I go, "Mom, I have those cards." She goes, "Oh, I threw them away. You have too much junk in there."
Oh.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And this is the irony. And I'm picking on my mom for a second. She goes, her mom, my grandma, her mom would throw her comic books away. So Mom had to hide them. She had to hide her Captain Marvel and Spirit comics. And so I think that's really odd that she would throw away my Mars Attacks cards. But I guess I could have put them in a box and somewhere, but I don't know.
And that's how obsessions are made.
Yep. Oh yeah. And then when they reprinted them, I was fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about Hypnotwist, Scarlet by Starlight a bit. They're B movies essentially.
That's That's
so
cool.
Where does your love of B movies come from?
It just comes from as a kid. You know, 'cause the TV was always on. You know, mom was always watching old, you know, Gary Cooper movies or Cary Grant or something. And once in a while there was a monster movie on, and I think she let us see the like Wolfman. You know, the Universal movies were the first ones we saw. So it was like, oh, these are awesome, and you know, and so I would get the TV guide and look to see where the next monster movie was. But in those days, it had a description. It would say movie, melodrama. That's how we knew it was a Universal horror movie. So I got confused at what melodrama meant and monster movies meant.
Right.
So I would, my mom would be watching something, you know, some maybe film noir or something dark that feels like a monster movie, and she would just be watching it, and I'd look at it, and go, is there a monster in this? And then when there wasn't, but I was still into the movie, I started thinking like, well, you can do stories without the monster, but make it just as cool. That was a storytelling, you know, thing that just opened up my mind, you know. So that was that. So I've always been a fan of film noir movies, monster movies, just the darker side of movies. You know, nothing too much toward violence and sex, but just the oddball movies. You know, the creepy, weird ones we grew up with. It's different now. Streaming, cable, all that stuff changed the movie. But we used to, as kids, you know, you got what you know what you can get. You know,
sure. Well, right. No, I mean, I keep trying to tell my son, like, you know, it used to be if you wanted to watch something that was on television, you had to go there and watch it at the time it was showing. You couldn't see it again. There was not.
You didn't. You couldn't.
Not a second chance. You know, like maybe with some weird old Abbott and Costello movie, like they might play it again in 6 months or something, right? But it wasn't like you could just watch anything that you wanted, and there was essentially so little to watch in a way that I don't know that everyone knew about all of the things, right? Like now today, there's so much stuff that nobody knows about anything in a way.
Yeah. It's it was more like if you, and this is the hard part. I never did this, but guys would say, oh yeah, if you know, I'm trying to think of an obscure movie, just some kind of creepy old monster movie, and if it was at 3 a.m, but that was the only time you could see it.
Right.
I know guys that would, you know, wake up and watch them. You know, I couldn't. I wasn't allowed to do that. In our house is so small. If I did that, I would have got caught and in trouble. So I didn't bother. But these guys said, "Oh yeah," and then he goes, "But what always happens is you start watching it and you're like, yeah," and then you wake up and it says the end.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know, a thing I would do for a lot of shows would be I would tape record it, right? I could listen to it later, especially comedies. Like I love tape recording Monty Python, you know, and like listening to them later and like, you know, like sort of just getting the riffs and getting the thing, you know. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember recording. What did I record? Because my mom got a job at an inopportune time, and she was really into Dark Shadows. So I would have to record Dark Shadows for her every day, and I explained what was going on because the show is really quiet. You never notice how quiet a show is. That a lot of it was just really slow visuals of somebody walking across the room, but and you just hear clinking with a glass, and that's it. There was no, you know. And then they would talk. I go, "Oh, this is somebody talking," and then Barnabas is over here and he's listening, and I would have to explain the whole thing to him, but it was just, you know, with a tape recorder, you know, because that's all we had.
Yeah. Oh, the old days. I mean, in some ways, it's fantastic now, right? Like on demand, these things, it's all great. But I don't know. I feel like it was better when we had to work for our entertainment. You know, I think it connected it to us in a way that it doesn't now. You know.
Yeah, you can now it's like I skip movies because it's so available. You know, like you said before, it was like, nope. You know, it's at 2:00 on Sunday on this channel that we don't get so well, but I'm going to watch that movie, you know, that now it's like, you know what, I can watch this movie anytime. And then the bigger curse for me is a DVR. Well, I can watch it whenever I want to. I'll just record it and save it, you know? But I do appreciate it. It's working. It's working. You can see movies when you want to see them if you know how.
Jordan tells me we've got a question, so let's pot a question up. The question is, Podrigo, hello, my friend. Hypnotwist reads like being in someone else's dream. What guided your approach to this story?
Yes. Well, I'm known for like going through real periods of like really dense dialogue in my stories, especially in the Palomar stories, where I was just like stacking word balloons over word balloons. I just went crazy with writing, and then I would come to a stop. Like I don't want to write a lot, but I still want to tell a story. And I go, but if you tell a story without words, that's another there's another bit of work you have to do. There's a lot of work to do that because you have to tell a story without words. So that's another, chore. But I was up to the challenge. So when I started putting out those books like Hypnotwist and Maria M and the Troublemakers and stuff, I started doing that. When I came to Hypnotist, I thought, oh, this would be a great, and a great idea for a movie to say. So I'll play this as a movie, but I still have to explain what's going on through the pictures. So it's basically just to do a story, challenge myself to do a story without words because I was known for writing so much. And I just wanted to try it without. And it was fun, but it is hard. You have to hold back and not put a word in there.
Yeah. Well, so I wanted to ask you what's the difference maybe in your process of creating a story. Can you talk a bit about the difference between doing something that is driven as much by dialogue or something that is wordless?
Well, I usually draw at the same time I'm writing, and a lot of times it's just I'm just there just for the drawings, for the characters tilting their heads to talk to each other, or mocking somebody or whatever. It's usually a dialogue scene. I like it just like that. Now I have to write something. It's not the other way around where I write something, then I put the expressions to it in pencil. Yeah, no, it's more like I've just come to the point where I just draw so much faster and telling the story that way faster, just basically like thumbnails, except finished art. And then I have to think of something for them to talk about. Yeah. So I have to be good enough to match it with the drawings, so I have to come up with something that works.
Okay. All right. Are you saying that you don't really like plot out ahead of time, especially that you sit down at the page and you start drawing?
That's sort of how it is now. Before I would, there's a few stories I did plot out because usually I come up with stories as I'm finishing something else. I'm finishing on Love and Rockets and I'm thinking, oh, I can't wait to get to this new thing. And so I make notes to remind myself and then lose them, of course. And then, but yeah, it's always just, well, yeah.
Okay. When you're doing a silent story as opposed to something with dialogue, is there more of a need to have something significant or something action-based that happens on the page because you don't have the dialogue to fall back on to drag the viewer forward, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if that made sense as a question.
You can cover your ass better with words. You can literally change what somebody's saying to fix the rest of the story. That's the advantage of that. Telling a story without words is hard because I don't like. Let's say I don't think I could do a satisfactory Palomar story without words. The words really important to what was going on in the story, and it would have to be a real short story if I had to do a Palomar type story without dialogue. So Hypnotwist is like a dream. It's a fever dream. So that's why I don't have to stick to anything I don't have to explain, well, how did she get gas at this gas station? If it, that kind of thing. It was more of a dream logic, fantasy, with a lot of dark corners.
Yeah. Were there, maybe you get a little closer to Podrigo's question, at least what I think his question might have been, because these are in many ways B movies, starring Fritz. Is there a particular B movie, or maybe just a movie director in particular that you were thinking about when you did Hypnotwist?
You know, I was thinking like maybe more or less, you know, like it's for the tone, early David Lynch or something. You know, I'm just throwing out a name we all know. There's an old movie from the early 50s called, it's got two titles. It's called Dementia or Daughter of Horror. Now, it's just an experiment. It's an hour-long experimental film about a woman who wakes up in a hotel room, in a tattered hotel room, and then it's her journey through the night. It's all the crazy people, and there's sound and stuff, but there's not any dialogue. There's like weird mumbling, and you hear people talk, you know, mumbling and stuff, and you know, and it's inspired by the Salvador Dali film, Buñuel film. I just remember Andalusian Dog. I don't remember the French title. Un chien something, but it was obviously inspired by that because there's similar things in it, but. That was what I was thinking of. Like, well, that would be great if I could do a comic like this, because I just like that world. I like that noir world, that creepy. There's monsters in the world, but you don't see them. You know, you just see the people who deal with the monsters and the scary, the ghosts, and all that stuff. So, and then you see reality, harsh reality in it, like mean cops and just crazy, creepy stuff. And anyway, so I was thinking along those lines. So I always go back to the past of early films to try to grab dream logic, because that's how I used to dream as a small kid. My earliest dreams I remember were sort of like Universal horror movies. I dreamed within sets, like a set, like the Wolfman set where it's a forest, bare trees and there's fog on the ground and he's prowling around. That's how I would dream, that where I was, or that's where I was going, or I was checking out, so.
Cool. That's yeah.
Have I talked about comics yet? Well,
no. I guess I wonder what see. I'm not an artist, so I don't know how to frame this question right. Like there's portions of technique. Just to pick a page at random. Here's page 12 where she has her shoes on and then she's falling through, and then like the way that you use black, I don't know. I mean, I'm really fascinated by this as a technical. I'm not holding up the page, of course, enough for you to know what I'm talking about. But I'm really fascinated by this as like a technical exercise, if you see what I'm saying. Is it and then the next page, like the solid blacks, and she's only a head floating in space. Can you talk about this at all?
Other than
terrible question, Jesus.
Well, I'll start with the black and white. That is interesting because when I look at it, it's work. It's my work, and I know what it looks like.
Yeah.
But you're bringing me back to the origins of why we emphasize the black and white look of our comics, right? It was because we used to hate what we called blank panels. Like we would see a panel from a comic book and there was no backgrounds or anything, and we'd be that's a blank panel. They didn't want to draw the street or whatever, And so we didn't want that, so we just started filling it with blacks, the black corners, like you said, and just to make it look like it fit on the page with the same amount of black, and just so it wouldn't look, it wouldn't have a cheated look, where it's like, oh, we just drew it and didn't bother with the rest of the detail, So if we didn't bother with the detail, we would put black on there, So that just worked out. It was an eye thing, and I think for me the inspiration was Tezuka. I loved Astro Boy as a kid. I was really young, like 4 or 5, and when it was on the air. And I didn't understand it because the stories were convoluted, but I just remember, loving Astro Boy and that it was black and white like that because of the old black and white days. And then I finally saw the Japanese art in Astro Boy comics, and I just loved how it was black and white like that. It was, you got the blacks and whites and everything. And, and I even went through this period, in the 60s drawing like Tezuka style cartoons, a guy with a big mop of hair, covering his eye. And he's like, another guy with a patch, and anyway, I just I was into that. That's where the black and white, the style of storytelling of her going through the floor like that and all that. That's just slowing down, because dialogue pushes the imagery really fast. If you'll notice, people
Yeah.
are in and out really fast in a dialogue scene. I do this. I had to time it to see like a silent movie, Buster Keaton or something, where you just see everything happening. Because nowadays, what bothers me about fast-moving movies, and this you hear this a lot from old people, is they just cut too quick. They're cut too good. You don't get to absorb, what you're saying. And in those old and you watch a Buster Keaton, a kid, a 3-year-old kid can watch a Buster Keaton short and think it's great. Wouldn't even miss the new way of doing it. Because it's good. It's timed. You see everything he's doing, and it usually like ends up falling and stuff and looking around like, what just happened? Kids love that. That's great. It's timeless.
Yeah. How much do you think about about where the page turn lands when you're doing a book, or do you not worry about it as much?
I didn't used to worry about it until I found out that I didn't know, because I'm not an art director.
Right.
But you're not supposed to, like in a comic book, you're not supposed to face the characters outward.
Yeah.
I just, you're supposed to face them inward. And I go, well, that's not how it works. It's got to move back and forth. And so sometimes I'll literally switch pages, change a little bit of the dialogue, just because I had them facing out. Now they're facing in, and then panels will be, repetitious. I go, wait a minute, I got people facing the same way here now. And so I have to rework it. I have to just remind myself that have everybody facing inward. but because I usually plan the 2 pages that will appear in the book at the same time, as far as layouts go.
Yeah. I want to talk about process, but there's another question I am told. So that question is from Peter Landwehr. Wordless comics have been a rarity in my experience. Jim Hence's Rope of Sand is the only other one I can think of off the bat. There's actually many more, but do you have a wordless comic that you particularly like by another artist?
I'm just trying to go back earlier than, and I'm blanking. I blank out a name, so nobody be offended, please. A wordless comic that I loved. I mean, one of them. I'm blanking out. I really am. I mean, as soon as we go away, I'll go, oh, and I'll come up with 50.
Yeah. It's always a put you on the spot kind of question. That's Sorry that one.
It was usually it's probably from like a mainstream comic. It's probably I can imagine like okay, would you read like a Richie Rich comic or Archie comic stuff? Sometimes they'll have 2 pages, of them Jughead doing something, but it's wordless. I think that's where I first saw that, where they tell a little story. It's 2 pages, and he just does this gag, and then you'd see the other kid comics, and they had them too. And I think there was a pattern, because sometimes the kid doesn't want to read. No, but he wants to be told the story. Sure. And when you're a kid or an older kid, you're like, they're just dumb. They don't want to read that. And now, people look at Keaton and Chaplin and silent movies and just picture stories, as great storytelling. And anyway, that applied to comics to me too. I go, it's not the whole book like that. It's just these little stories here and there. And that's where we get spoiled growing up. You had more variety in what could be in there.
We talk about Keaton and Chaplin. I almost think that they transcended the limitations of their medium, right? Like we don't like them because they're silent. I mean, we do like them because they're silent, but that's not the reason we like them. We like them because they're fantastic storytellers. When you purposely choose to limit your toolbox, though, I think that creates some really interesting things in comics. For my answer to that question, I would point to the author Jason, the Norwegian author, who's got 7 or 8 different books at least, and they're all wordless. And it's fantastic. It's a really interesting way to tell a story, because you have to do a certain amount of more work, right, to set the tone in the scene that you normally can just get really out of the way fast with dialogue.
That was the thing. I didn't emphasize it enough, but I have Fritz going down the ceiling, coming down. It had to be timed. I can't just jump from this and that, because like you said, the dialogue would have brought those panels together. But without it, you got to watch her do it, So that for me, it was a great exercise because I had to slow down.
Yeah.
I move too fast. I need to slow down in my comics, here and there.
Yeah. We've got another question, I'm told.
Okay.
Doug Downing, what does the new book tell us about Fritz's career at this point? Has it changed or evolved in any way from the previous B-movie novels? For example, Scarlet by Starlight is a pretty racy tale. Does that signify anything regarding her personally?
Absolutely. I created Fritz. She was my first character that I created for myself way back in 1980. And I didn't get to, I used her just a couple of little scenes in the first Love and Rockets comics, but I put her aside because I didn't know what to do with her. And then I put her in Birdland, and then I decided to put her in regular Love and Rockets as a regular character. But of all the characters that I was creating, since I did so many characters in Palomar, creating a new set of characters in America was tough because I go, well, I can't repeat the same people. So when I ended up doing Fritz and Petra, her sister, their sister Petra had a personality. Her daughter Venus had a personality. Other people around had personalities, but Fritz never did.
Right.
And so I thought, well, that's good. That's her character. She's just there to bounce off dialogue to or whatever. But the way my mind goes, it nagged me. I go, well, what's her story? What is the person who doesn't talk and doesn't, like we've all known people from high school or later on where you just didn't know them other than superficially, and it's been pleasant and you know them, and then you find out something crazy about them. It's like, what? They robbed what? They blew up what? Or, it doesn't even have to be that ridiculous. Just something like, oh, I don't know. I can't think of anything, but anyway, Fritz didn't have. It was a mystery to me, but not to the reader because I'd never really emphasized anything about her. So I just like, and also I just like drawing her. She looked different from other characters with her eyebrows and stuff. And so anyway, I decided it was a point in the Love and Rockets where I wanted to do fantasy stories, but down to earth ones, not like just sparkly, imagination, but stories, basically film noir type stories. But I have a hard time coming up whole cloth with characters each time. That's why I normally do serial and then the same characters because the story just flows. So I just decided I'm going to make a Fritz an actress, and her personality would be the character she plays in these movies, right? Well, I didn't plan to make the movies graphic novels right away. There were going to be issues of Love and Rockets that I was going to devote to a Fritz story, and it would be a part of a movie that she was in. But I screwed up because I thought, oh, at this point she's 35 years old. So I thought, because I had her as a psychoanalyst for a while, and I thought, but by now, in my time frame, she's 35 years old. That's a late. Starting for a leading woman, in movies. So I made it that she has this mysterious life that I can't talk about now because it's going to be exposed. Between her college days and she was 35 years old, she had a secret life that's coming up. But so I basically, the question is correct. All the Fritz movies are aspects of her personality, and that's where she shows us who she is through these movie characters and these films.
Yeah.
But
I wanted to follow up from the notion that they're B movies, but they are really racy, and well, they're very, very sexual. Let's not even call them racy. They're flat out. There's people fucking in them. Now that's great. I'm all for people fucking, but how do you square that circle, I guess?
It just came naturally in the early issues of Love and Rockets. It got racier and racier, and it just seemed, for me, it just was like the adult thing to do. I grew up in the 70s, remember, and you couldn't go see a R-rated movie without seeing nudity or sex.
Right.
In those days, it was just no matter what you saw, almost. Except for The Exorcist. Anyway, but a lot of movies you see at the drive-in, double features and this and that. There was nudity and sex in them, and that was a crazy freedom then. And then that tightened up in the 80s and 90s. But so I like I said, I think of my comics. I'm inspired for doing comics more about films that I've seen, and than comic books, because there was only so much I got from comic books. I learned to do things,
Sure.
with the art and storytelling and all that stuff. But films is more elastic. There's more going on. They didn't. I don't know. They're just more going on and following films for your inspiration to do storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess what I was trying to center on was B movies. Well, B movies can be any time period, but particularly because of the black and white and the nature of both of these stories. You said film noir. I think 40s, 50s, 60s is the time period that we're talking about, stylistically at least.
Yeah, that's where I'm from.
Those time periods had no sex. I mean, there was no sex at all in those times. So what led you to juxtapose those things?
It was I'd known about what was going on in European comics. We didn't see a lot of them then, not till after Heavy Metal magazine in '77 showed us, translations of them, and it continued. And then the interest in, European comics, started to grow. But I would see, like I said, fanzines. My brother would collect fanzines, and and it would feature European artists, and there was always nudity. It was just the norm in their comics. So I thought, Spider-Man doesn't have nudity, but these people do.
Not usually, yeah.
Yeah, not yet. But so it was that. It was just more like, well, this is the adult world. I wanted to look to I was impatient. I was impatient with the boys' club. I wanted the little boys' club. I wanted the big boys' club.
Right.
And having it was my dream to be my dream as a kid was to be an adult.
Yeah,
but not to get away with stuff, but to have the power and respect to just go and do your thing, because a kid doesn't have that freedom,
Sure.
For good reason. You have to be protected.
No, absolutely.
For so many years. So anyway, it was just a fantasy of mine to be an adult. I would have made a lousy adult at 9 years old, let me tell you. So anyway, yeah, it was just to be adult, the sex and this and that. You could see it in movies and stuff and underground comics, so when I saw Heavy Metal magazine, the reprinting, of course, Heavy Metal magazine brought Richard Corbin to the mainstream, if you want to call it metal mainstream. He's more
it was, I think,
artist.
yeah.
So you'd see Richard Corbin, and he had swinging dicks and boobs and all that. So that meant science fiction for adults, nudity and boobs, that kind of thing. Just and so you saw that a lot in the European books, but it would be in a science fiction story or a horror story. And so I thought, mixing that, I go, well, why can't you have that with a serious story, a drama, like a film does or used to, at the time.
No,
So
even in prose, the John Carter stories, everybody on Barsoom is naked.
Yeah,
I mean, it's in the text, man. They're when they made the movie, they put the clothes on them, but yeah, no, in the book, that's super interesting. You've done straight out pornographic comics, Birdland. No, and this is good for Eros when Fantagraphics needed saving back then. Straight porn, and then you've also, though, at the same time done young reader comics, Measles in particular. I'm wondering, is there any cognitive dissonance between having both of those things in your head?
No, you just switch from Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde. Really, for me, it's just a switch. I'm going to do a Venus story. I'm going to do Measles, the collection of Venus stories.
Yeah.
Okay, keep it clean and no references to sex. Simple as that. And then with the and then I do the crazy porny stuff. It's like, make it funny. That's why, to me, I wouldn't do adult and sexual situations unless it was funny.
Right.
I mean, I know I've done it seriously, but it's usually short. It's a panel or two, but that's it. But most of the time, it's supposed to be funny and fun. But I mean, you're with them instead of making fun of them. I would never make fun of that. That's not my thing.
Sure. No, I love Birdland. I think it's great.
I tried to be so funny in that. Every
Yeah.
word balloon, I try to make it funny. That was really hard.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
really hard.
Oh, what's the impetus for doing the Venus stories?
I just wanted to do a character that the sort of was like that what I imagined I was like as a kid, except make her funnier, because you can get away with a little bit more with female characters. So if I did it a boy with the same thing, it wouldn't have worked so well for me. I did Marble Season and that was fun, but it was only a one-time deal. Whereas Venus, I could do a series about this person, a kid who thought like a kid all the time, and she was, to me, she was funny. She was funny in her weird way of expressing things and absorbing things and that sort of thing. So it's just keeping it clean and move away from the crutch of violence and sex.
Yeah. Did you have a clear audience in mind, or was it just like let's hope this sells? Do you know what I mean? Like
anytime it's anything outside of Love and Rockets, it's let's hope it sells.
Yeah.
But see, I get so much into what I'm doing, and you're talking, and you remember we're talking about 40s, 50s, 60s influenced comic books.
Sure.
That I'm still there when I'm making comics. I'm still there. I just picked up a collection of All Winners comics with Captain America and Submarine. But see, to me, I pick it up and it's a comic book. It's not, oh, this is a strange old comic book. Like you'll show somebody who doesn't really know about that stuff, and they'll see an old comic book and they all say, "Why do you have this?"
Right.
And I pick up All Star or All Winners Squad or something, and I go, "Oh, it's a comic book." Here's Unearthly Spectaculars. Here's Tiger Boy. Here's Justice League with Solomon Grundy and Blockbuster hugging. It's a comic book. For me, because I grew up with so many kinds that I never settled on one type. I mean, I knew the Kirby Lee Ditko Triumvirate was superior, but the other stuff was pretty damn good too.
Yeah, no, for certain, absolutely. Absolutely. There's another question. No, there's not another question. Well, then why's the sign up, man? The sign's up. I swear to God. Professional show business. Let's talk about craft a little bit. What's your process? You've got a blank piece of paper. What happens next?
I'll have a crib sheet. Just have a sheet next to it so I could write notes or just scribbles of panel sequences and stuff. And then it gets straight to the page. I go, okay, these two pages are facing. I haven't done this title yet. I haven't put a title above the first panel yet. I'll do that. I'll just mess with that at first. But it's usually a base. It's super, super indulgent. It's always been, what am I going to draw? And what are they going to be dressed like? Oh, if I'm going to give her these boots, that means it's cold. So I got to put coats on them and, just weird stuff like that. Because I don't think, well, no, a woman would wear boots and just for fashion and it's not even cold. But I don't think that. I go, oh, they're cold. And so I get too into it and I'll might draw something that I was like, how did I get into this? I just wanted to have them walking around having a good time in the sun, So sometimes the indulgence, gets away. It can get away from you. But most of it is that I just what setting, what tone I want. Because like I said, I've been doing it for so long that they're writing themselves if they're characters I like. So they write themselves and they're telling me, okay, put me in these clothes and send me this way. And I'm going to be in a bad mood today. Okay, that's what you write.
Okay, all right. So, but in terms of the actual process, I mean, are you literally just drawing what pops into your head from that scenario that you set up?
Yeah, at first, nothing finished. Just kind of lightly, and sometimes some are finished, but I'm putting it around there. But I'm thinking of dialogue at the same time. So, and the borders and the margins, I'll just write dialogue. Next to the panel and this and that. I'll just write the dialogue that way. So I'm starting with the art.
Yeah. So are you? I'm just saying I'm not clear. Are you starting on artboard or are you?
Yeah, right away, pretty much. But I'll have the scrap paper next to me, for the sloppy stuff. But yeah, the artboard's right there. I've already.
You're not doing thumbnails ahead of time.
I used to. And thumbnails are great, but that's because I had more movement and action in my stories. And now I have just a bunch of people sitting around talking at presently. Thumbnails a little bit. It depends on what I'm going to be doing. If I have to stage an action scene or a Harvey Kurtzman-esque, a 9-panel grid action scene, and I'll thumbnail it, but not all the time. I'm lazy and I like people just talking and leaning back with a drink, that kind of thing.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I mean, I think you might be the first cartoonist that I've spoken to. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jordan, but that is not doing is not pre-planning at all.
Yeah,
that's pretty awesome, dude.
It is, but you find yourself, because when you do pre-drawing like a thumbnail and stuff, you do loosen up better and you do catch mistakes before you make them on the the artboard. I remember I heard a story about Carl Barks, how at the end of doing Donald Duck and Uncle Scrooge stories, he didn't even he barely even penciled. He just would just do where he was going to do it and inked the figures because he knew it so well. And sometimes there was panels where he didn't even bother to do a thumbnail. He just went on it because it was an easy drawing or whatever. And then he started and he admitted this, he started doing too many silhouettes because, there's a lot of silhouettes. And I saw examples of that. And I go, oh yeah, he's doing too many. Shouldn't we have more than one on a page, But so anyway, I can't remember the question because I talk too much.
No. You're doing great, man. I'm loving this. So you're drawing in pencil. I'm assuming you're not going straight to ink, obviously.
No, and I don't do computer and stuff.
Just double checking.
Yeah. It's just pencil and right on.
So you're sketching out and trying to get your figures in place and putting dialogue off to the side. Mm-hmm. Is that
sometimes in the panel, so I don't lose it. But my sloppy handwriting is really bad sometimes. I go, I don't know what letter that is. I don't know what word that is. Because I have to letter it later. In ink. Yeah. So, but
you're all lettering your own stuff, right? You're not using a font that's your.
No, because only because I never learned how. I tried to learn, but I didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And
how can you say you have sloppy handwriting? You have fantastic handwriting.
Oh, handwriting, or you mean
lettering?
No, lettering is horrible, but I was a lot better. I was a lot better when I started, and then all of a sudden I just got really bad at it. I don't know.
I think it fits your art very well. Which is the most important thing, right? That lettering is it feels native to the art.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, because you've seen some really beautiful art that they replace the word balloons with typeset stuff. Yeah, and it looks robotic. It looks.
It's one of the bad fonts are probably the thing that kills comics more than almost any other thing, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. It just takes. It makes a distance between the words and the pictures, right? And they have to be organic and flowing together. Hand lettering is the only way for me.
Oh, and then we grew up with the great hand letterers like Ben Oda and those guys. Just, Joe, Sam Rosen. And, those guys, terrific.
Yeah. Do you lay out your entire story, your entire sequence in pencil first?
I've always worked haphazardly. Like I'll do the page, and sometimes it won't even work for the story anymore. Once it starts to go, flow into other areas, sometimes that page won't go there anymore. So I'll use it for a different, change the dialogue and use it for a different story.
Interesting.
I'm not supposed to say these things, but I put stories together from scraps, from stories I just abandoned. And I just re-inked. I just inked differently than what the pencils had, and
I love that. That's great. I'm impressed because as I say, most people really it seems to me that the biggest struggle that most cartoonists have from interviewing almost 200 of them at this point is working it out ahead of time, figuring it out before they commit it. And I love the fact that you're just committing it. I think that's great. and I love your work, so that works so well.
Well, that's great. I mean,
you should be happy with that. Not
it's just one of those things that it worked out, and I'm not going to mess with it. You know?
Yeah, yeah. So how do you decide that a page is usable, or a page is the right page, or that you have to change 9 things, or it can go as through? Like, how does this process work for you?
It's just when you get there, you know, when the story is unfolding and you're putting pages together, and sometimes reshuffling pages and that kind of thing. Sometimes you'll just get there. I go, this is a problem. Now this must be fixed. This must be something, you know. It just, it depends where you go. And like, oh, this sequence doesn't matter anymore.
Sure. Well, let me try to quantify it a little bit, or maybe. So how many pages a day do you draw when you're in the flow?
Oh, it takes about, I mean, with proper time, using your time properly, it's 2 days to do a page probably. But I'm crazy. I'll have a page that I can't finish, and so I'll just put it aside and work on something else.
Yeah.
You know, I don't let writer's block stop me.
Sure.
And so what I do now, I'm usually working on 3 different comics at once.
Right.
So that keeps me rolling, and because I don't want to stop, you know, and then I'll get back to the other one. Like this issue of Love and Rockets is just giving me hell, because it's the script. I mean, I had to go ahead and draw it. It's already late, and I had to just draw the whole story, backgrounds and everything. Now I have to add dialogue. Yeah. And that's where you go, oh, and all you need is a trigger. Something will trigger it. That's why I'm watching movies all the time. I'm reading things, and I'm just waiting for that thing to be triggered. But those triggers come a lot harder as you age, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're at the dialogue stage, does that go faster as a process if it's firing on all cylinders? I mean, are you doing 3 pages of dialogue, or?
It's usually pencils, dialogue, whiteouts, paste ups, you know, things just repairing that I was too anxious to do and I should have waited, that kind of thing. Because I'm like a kid. I'm really anxious to get to this page and finish it. There's nothing more pleasant in comics than finishing something. It's finished. And then when it comes out, you know, and then you see it in the store or it comes in the mail, you're like, there it is. It's out there, you know. That's a great experience. That's a great feeling. Good, and you're also self-critical, like, well, this isn't that good. I got to do it better next time. You know?
It's weird because I feel like you draw more than 30 pages of comics a month. Maybe I'm insane, but
it feels that way. And
it feels that way to me, man. Like maybe it's like, you know, the thing about buses, how they arrive together, and so 2 books will come out at roughly the same time, and it's 200 pages of Gilbert, you know?
Yeah, there was that one period where there was 3 graphic novels coming out at once. That was weird. That was about 10 years ago. And I was like, oh, it just got mistimed because they were all different publishers. So, you know, they weren't in sync. So it was like, oh, that looks like I would work a lot, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'm impressed by it either way. So when you're, so you've got a batch of pages and you're ready to finalize them. How many pages are you kind of doing at a time, right? Like,
nothing's ever done till they're done. I mean, they're always in the middle of working on fixing, you know, starting, redoing. They're always, it's always this mess of unfinishedness.
Yeah.
You know,
well, okay, but let's take an issue of Love and Rockets, the issue that you're working on right now. How many pages do you have to fill?
Well, Jaime and I both have 16 pages each. So Love and Rockets is 60 pages. That should be it should be easier than the 24-page books, but it's not, because you have to tell your story in 16 pages instead of 24. So, you know, you have to tell, what are you going to say, you know, to the reader, and, you know, with the characters and stuff. Yeah. So you start to think, well, you can't do a goofy story about a hippo who smokes pot. You know, you do that story because you need the pages for something else. What you think you and the reader might feel is the most important story to read. That's what you for Love and Rockets. It's always, what's the most important story you have, because you know, because a lot of times I like to goof around and just do 3-page stories about nothing. But, you know, Love and Rockets doesn't have that space anymore. You know?
Yeah. It almost sounds like a lot of your creative process is actually editing
Mm,
as much as creating.
Yeah, constantly.
And
I think that's
and
why
narrowing and winnowing.
Yeah, actually, that's a lot of it. Even looking at it, knowing that I'm going to do that,
Interesting.
preparing myself for that.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Okay. You work. I'm assuming you're working 100% physical. You're not drawing digitally.
No, everything's physical.
Everything's
Whiteouts.
physical,
I mean, Dan Klaus was shocked that we still use whiteout because I guess he cleans it up on computer. But no, everything is done by hand. Everything.
Yeah. And so from a technique point of view, I mean, one of the things that really strikes me about your art is just how kind of ink heavy it is. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a really good way. We were talking about the blacks earlier, but also there's just so much cross hatching or texture or fill, or I don't know what the technical words are, which seems really time intensive to me.
That depends on which book it is, which story it is.
Sure.
Sometimes I marvel at when I have to do reference my own material, and I look back at some of the Palomar stories or anything, and I'm thinking like, "Holy hell! There's a lot of gunk on this page. I mean, a lot of ink. There's a lot of ink on these pages.
Yeah.
I'm surprised how manic and tight, tightly crunched together everything was. Because now I love to spread out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I enjoy the looseness that you have found over the years. But there's a lot of cross hatching, and there's just a lot of little lines. And so how much because it almost sounds to me like you're putting more thought into the book at the inking stage, the finalization stage, where the words are going down, the ink is going down. That's when you're doing most of the work, it almost sounds like to me. Even though you've built the foundation, right? Does that seem accurate or
the most work to do on a page, you mean? It's really it's all of it, but I think the hardest these days is dialogue. Yeah. I'll tell you what, that's why I said this already. That's why I use continuing characters, because you're in a flow and they're always writing themselves. Right. And so if I do my best in corralling those characters, not having too many like I've done before, I'll work with that. They'll speak for me somehow. This issue is cold turkey. I'm having characters that are only going to appear in Love and Rockets this issue 10 that we're working on. Mm-hmm. And so that's hard to come up with because readers, I think for myself and the readers, we feel better when we already know the character, mm-hmm. In a way we feel we know them. We don't necessarily know them, but we feel we do. And so you go right away and you read the dialogue and you're, oh yeah, okay, I know this person. Yeah, I know who this is. So I'm going cold turkey with the characters I don't know. I have this weird mental block of like, well, I don't want to give them my best stuff because I'm not going to use them again. And that's stupid. You use your best stuff every time, Yeah. But I got this block. So I got this writer's block right now that I'm really trying to break through.
Wow. Interesting. I wouldn't have thought about it that way. That's an interesting way of thinking about. I'm endlessly fascinated by creativity. Because I sell the comics.
Yeah.
I don't have to sweat over those details and figuring it out. And I think there's a real interesting power there. Yeah,
it's got its own troubles.
Yeah. No, I bet it does. Yeah, I don't know what the next question is. It's something about ink, maybe. It's the how do you decide what line weight to use in terms of individual characters, right? Because there's some characters who have it's thicker, right? Does that make sense?
No, you're talking about my recent work because it's changed.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at this little.
Oh, okay. Because sometimes It depends if my ink is if my ink is properly watered. Sometimes it just gets real junk. See, I'm living in Las Vegas, so things dry up really quick.
Okay.
And so
all right.
you can't have a cap of ink open for a very long time.
Yeah.
I'm from Southern California, so I have it open all the time,
Yeah.
I mean, I have hippie ink, and but here it's like I have to cap it right away because it'll dry up, and then I got to pour water in it, and it's a mess. So sometimes it's simply if the ink is cooperating that day, what the thickness of the line and stuff. I got lazy because I started inking Fritz, who's known for having exquisitely smooth skin. That's the character. It's a weird thing about her. But so I decided, well, I got to make her look different. So I started just using a dead line rapidograph pen, technical pen, just to give that, look of she's otherworldly looking, because there are people we've met, growing up, we've met people who are like, they're not even earthling. They're like a doll person,
Sure.
Well, she's that type of person where they're male or female, you'd see they look like dolls. How do they come out? There's, they don't have pores. They don't have any acne, well, anyway, that's the type of person she is, because I just wanted her to be sort of almost like an alien, a ghost alien, to make her more interesting to me. So I just started using a rapidograph pen and all that. And then I started getting lazy. And since I already had the pen, I started inking the other characters with it. So if you see a really thin, dead line all the time, that's because I just didn't jump to a proper crow quill, to thicken up the lines.
Have you had problems securing all of the equipment, the ink that you use over the years? Because this is a thing that many cartoonists have said that I like a certain nib and I can't get it anymore, or this brand of ink and they stop making it.
That happens that happens over time. It surprises you because you think, well, it's going to be the same. It's going to be the same as in 1915.
Right?
No, it's like my brother and I use Speedball Super Black India ink. Because that's the best stuff. Well, it's not as dense as it used to be, and we're talking. We started in the 80s, so that's a few years ago. But to me, it's yesterday. Like, well, just yesterday it was working fine, But that sometimes you'll find it's hard to find. Like sometimes I'll try to get alternate ink just to have an extra bottle of something else, and it's all watered down. It's all gray when you put it down.
Wow.
So, that's another reason I stopped using brush so much, because besides changing the size of the art I draw, I used to use a lot of brush, as you see in the Palomar stories. The pages are a lot larger, but it used to be black. And then after a while, it just came out gray, no matter how much you darkened it. So I just kind of abandoned that, because you get a black line with a pen, a crow pen. It's black, whereas with a brush, it's gray, and it just didn't like the look of it.
How big are the pages that you draw on?
Draw now? They're only about 8. I don't know, what is a typing paper? What is it? 8.5. Yeah, just a little bit bigger than that. That's how it's. Hyman still draws the old size. I think 11 by 17. I think, but I draw a lot smaller. Because these Fritz books is the Hypnotwist and SCARLET. I originally planned those to be paperback size, so I started drawing very large and simply. So when it got shrunk down, you wouldn't miss anything. The dialogue, the lettering, I can't be sure about that. But the art, I made it just 4 panels on a page and made it as simple as possible. So when it shrank down, you wouldn't get. You know how you've shown people comics that you really like and it's super detailed and you just loved it, and they just, no, where's Ziggy? Where's Peanuts? I'd rather just see a little clear line, because they just can't absorb that Wallywood EC page. It's so beautifully, just constipated, but it's great stuff. But sometimes it just doesn't register to others. So I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore.
Well, so but if you're drawing it close to 8.5 by 11, so Love and Rockets is published at magazine size. That you're
So my stuff is hardly shrunk. It's barely shrink. It's almost actual size. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's why. That's why I started switching more to technical pens and stuff, because I have to have a thinner line. Because because it looks gunky when you blow up art, small art to big. My art doesn't work that way. I've seen other artists whose work looks good when you blow it up, but mine looks horrible.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that, but this is the I'm going to ask this really, really stupid question here. On you probably don't have the book, so you can't look at it exactly, but page 33, this page right here, this one, it looks to me like that's Jimmy Olsen from the 1950 Superman, and that's the professor from the 1950 Superman.
Oh, you know what? I'll have to check. I should have brought one down. Oh man,
that looks exactly like, because I'm sure it's a coincidence, but I saw that and I was like, what?
The Adventures of Superman is still one of my favorite superhero things. I just love it so much, and that might have been an unconscious choice. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, in a dream comic, that's a good thing to do.
Jimmy Olsen. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, now I'm thinking of the character. Yeah.
Yeah, he looks just like Jimmy Olsen, and the other one looks like Professor Farnsworth. Yeah.
I don't know.
Not Farnsworth. No, Farnsworth is Futurama.
No, this is Periwinkle. Periwinkle.
Periwinkle, was
it?
Yeah,
they had a couple of mad scientists, but one of them is Periwinkle.
Okay. All right. All right.
See, I am into the show.
Sorry, I shouldn't have tangented there. Do you get any editing at all from any of your publishers? Like, how does that work?
Oh, well, Fantagraphic has always been pretty lax. I mean, in the early days, Kim Thompson and Gary were really sticklers on proper usage of words and sentences. So they were really down on us for that, and not just us, but any cartoonist that worked with them. And so that was going on for a while, and then after a while, they got busy with doing other things, so they got less attentive to that sort of thing. Yeah, they had it proofread. We wanted the spelling to be right, but there wasn't a lot of corrections anymore. There was not a lot of well, do you really want to say that? You could say this instead. It was more suggestions than orders. But now, no, I don't get any editing at all. I'm doing it so long that I can self-edit pretty well.
Right.
Now, DC and Marvel, that was editing.
What about the stuff like you were doing at Dark Horse, the creator on stuff?
Dark Horse, a little bit, not a little bit more lax, but if there was a problem, I always listen to an editor, even if, I normally don't, but when they do talk about clarification of a story, that's good to me, because I've never been good at clarifying what's going on in my stories. I can see so many mistakes now where I could have clarified something that would have saved us a lot of pages. But with a good editor, the times I do listen the most, the suggestions, like, I don't understand what's happening here. What are they doing here? What is that? Is that what you want to say? Is that, that kind of thing I will listen to, because sometimes I miss that,
Yeah. Is that in a way kind of the essence of making comics, is stripping out the unnecessary, winnowing it down to the most essential two images, sort of,
Yeah, it's such an organic. This is funny because you're bringing it up almost in technical terms.
Yeah, sure.
To my ears, because everything is just a flexible flow. For me, it's organic. It just doesn't. Reality and fantasy and comics and stories and reality, it's kind of a blur in my head. So none of my stories, even as serious as some of them could have been, they're still in a weird Gilbert tweaked world. Well,
it's a good world. I like that world. I want to be in that world. That's an okay world. Cool. What else? What do you got coming up? Do you have anything other than L&R that you want to plug?
Just the usual right now. Plugging would be Love and Rockets, of course, and I will have an issue of Blubber coming out. Another one. Nice. That's my adults only X-rated comic. I just like doing crazy monster stories, and I had to create a place for it. And I thought, well, I can't just do the crazy monster stuff because everybody does that. I mean, it's not. I know what I'll do. I'll throw sex in it. It was just a goofy thing to do, and just a fun exercise. And then I have a Love and Rockets spinoff called Psychodrama Illustrated, where it's just featuring the character Fritz as either just civilian actress or a character in her movies. So sometimes you don't know which is which because the way it flows, the stories. That's like I said, the character Fritz to me works as all her personalities are in the characters she plays in these stories. I just got ambitious with doing entire graphic novels with those stories, but I'm paying for that because I'm really hard to do. I'd rather serialize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the difference creatively for you, if there is one, for doing a longer story versus doing a short? To do it 16 pages at a time, serialized, versus I would say 65 pages here, but of course this was a shorter. Hypnotwist is shorter in Love and Rockets New Stories at one point.
Yeah.
Is there a difference in how you approach the work?
I'm more comfortable. Let's say I'm more comfortable doing the serialized way. Even though I get bored, sometimes I go, "Oh, the next chapter is going to be even more boring than what I'm drawing." But it always comes together. I surprise myself by when it's collected. I go, "Oh, I guess now part of my brain was convinced this was a good idea, and the other part saying this is a stupid idea." It usually comes. I trust myself that it'll come together. And if it's not the best book I did, I think it's a different book. That's how I see it, really.
Right.
So I'm never discouraged.
Right.
I mean, I'm never that happy with what I do. I think, I'm nearly satisfied with what I do, but there's always something to do better, I guess.
Yeah. That's a healthy way to approach it.
Yeah.
I keep having a theory that comics are better when they're shorter. And I don't know if I can prove it really, but I see a lot of the kids who are coming out of comic school, right? And they've studied for 2 years or 3-year program, right? Learning how to do comics, and then they're expected to tell a 200-page story.
That I'll tell you that.
Insane, right? Like
not. There's only very few people who are
with a 200-page story.
Yeah, I know, and you got to sit with it for several years because it's not, unless you're just those really quick line, artists, that just draw a few lines and that's a page of comic. Unless you're one of those, if you're someone who actually hunkers down and draws the damn thing, that can be hard. I mean, because I can't project. See, I'm not going to do graphic. I might do one more, but I'm not into the serialization works for me because if I did it all at once, I will miss so much. Yeah. If I did 200 pages at once, just hit away for 3 years or whatever, and did that, and then put it out. I would look at it and goes like, oh, that could have done so much with it. I came up with better stuff after, I worked on certain parts of it. So that's where serialization comes in. It's just you can always shift where you're going. Like I saying, if you planned on it going this way, there's a part in the middle where you could just change. You could just change it up, and then it'll make what you already written for the end work. It's just a million ways of doing it, and I have a scatterbrain, so
Yeah, no, I find the way that you have described doing comics to be incredibly freeing. Again, a lot of people, it's really focused on process, and the fact that you are, drawing a page and then maybe using it in a different story. I love this as an intellectual thing. I just think that's the coolest way you can make comics. And that you've made it work for 40 years. I'm not wearing a hat, but my hat off to you if I'm wearing a hat, my friend, because I think that's fantastic. We have a lot of young artists and writers who watch this series, obviously. If you had to make one suggestion, one thought about how to make comics, it doesn't even have to be a physical thing. It could be a sort of a psychological thing or an emotional thing, or it can be a physical thing, whatever it is. What would be your piece of advice to someone who wants to make comics?
My PayPal account is uh, gosh, just you know what? We can talk about technique. We could talk about, you know, putting it down on the page, writing. You know, I don't know where to begin, but do something you believe in. Really, I mean, it's the simplest thing to say. I know a lot of people do believe in themselves, and then they get discouraged. My brother and I have been doing Love and Rockets for 40 years because we didn't quit.
Yeah.
Right? We wanted to make comics. We, you know, we are making comics. You know, they're different from other comics. Okay, why not? You know, but I would just say believe in yourself. But I'm not sure I have to tell that to an indie artist. I might have to say that to a mainstream artist. You know, they believe in themselves as, you know, I'm a good artist, but, you know, believe in what you're saying to people. Bring, you know, go after humanity in your work. You know, that's my thing. You know, humanity is the most important thing. You know, but as far as putting it down on the paper, when you're going to sit down and, you know, ready to start ruling borders. Sometimes it's just easy. Like you just get the page, the size you're going to do it on. If you draw with pencil, you might be doing computer. So I don't know how to explain that to you, but you know, you rule the borders. You know, give yourself the width of it, and you just put do borders. That's sometimes when I am not inspired to do any kind of creative work, I rule borders because I get a stack of paper because I know I'm going to have to do that soon. And sometimes when you get excited about putting a story in paper, it's not ready yet. You got to do the borders, and you're like, you can't wait to do it. So I'll just have a stack of paper with you know, pencil lines for different pound sizes and stuff.
Wow. And you just pick out the one that works for that page?
Yeah, I'll slide over and I go, oh, this, I'll put these two together. No, they're repetitious. And then I'll, you know, or sometimes it's just the frame of the art. Sometimes it's just
Sure.
that, but you still have it. You know, you should still start putting your stuff down, because there's nothing more frustrating to me is that I got to get to this, but I can't. Whoa, you know.
Wow.
You know.
Well, I love this. I absolutely adore that. That is the greatest thing I've ever heard in any of these interviews, I think.
Oh my God, thank you. That's crazy.
Well, I want to thank you for talking to us about comics and making comics, and I admire you so much, not just for what you do, but the fact that you've got 40 years on your own terms, and you're doing the comics that you want to make on your own terms. That is, there's 8 guys who get to do that in a way, you know, and I salute you, sir, for that. I think that's really, really fantastic.
My Gmail account has my PayPal on it. If you want to, okay, being a dick now. Thank you, sir. Thank you. No, that's important to us because, you know, we're approaching 40 years and we still want people to like our comics, you know, but our job is to do that. You know what I mean? Make those comics. You know, it's not just like me and I'll sit back and drink wine or cognac, you know. No, it's like, hey, like our comics. Let us keep doing it. You know, that's how it is right now.
Yeah.
You know, in a few years I might feel different.
And that's why we made this the Graphic Novel of the Month Club pick. The books, and their books, it's Hypnotwist on one side, it's Scarlet in Starlight, which is hard to say. That is a tongue twister.
Scarlet by Starlight.
Right. It's just I want to say star when I say scar, and anyway.
That's a swipe, actually. I got it from a song from the 1940s called Stella by Starlight.
Okay.
And I always loved the title. I just loved the title, so I just swiped it. So.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. Half of what we do is swiping.
Me and Dad Atkins, man. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so this was the book for the month, and Gilbert Hernandez was the great author of this. If you're sitting at home, you don't know what else to buy. I don't know. I don't want to buy a comic. Here's a comic to buy. Let me tell you, our next shows that are coming up. Sunday, we are talking, this is the Kids Club book. We are talking to the authors of Oh My Gods, which is Stephanie Cook, Insha Fitzpatrick, and Juliana Moore. And we're going to talk to them. I believe this is their first comic. And so this is one of those things where it's it's almost 200 pages of your first comic. We'll talk about how that's different from what Gilbert does. And then our classic graphic novel of the month club for this month is Knights of the Dinner Table. I love Knights of the Dinner Table. I love Knights of the Dinner Table. Everyone's going to love Knights of the Dinner Table. I'm going to talk to Jolly Blackburn and all the people who do Knights of the Dinner Table, and that'll be a really good conversation. Next month, we are talking to Chip Zdarsky and Jason Liu for Afterlift. So that's next month's book, and then 2 months from now, you will be so impressed with who I have to talk to. I will tell you next month who that is. It is going to be a great conversation. I love talking about comics, and I love talking about comics with people who love comics. I want to thank Gilbert Hernandez for being my guest for Hypnotwist.
Thank you.
And yeah, man, comics, brother.
Absolutely.
Keep making them, keep doing them. Everybody, I want to thank all of you at home. I want to thank Jordan, who's behind my camera. I want to thank my staff, Zoe and Kat and Tony. I want to thank all of my members of the Graphic Novel of the Month Club. If you're not a member of the Graphic Novel of the Month Club, join today. There's something will flash at the bottom of the screen. There it goes. Really, seriously, join. That's how we keep this stuff going. I want to thank our sponsors at The Beat. And that's everybody I have to thank, right, Jordan? Jordan's saying, yes, I've got it. Thank you so much. We will see you next month. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Hey! Thank you for watching this episode of the Graphic Novel of the Month Club. If you enjoyed what you were watching, please subscribe and hit that bell up in the top corner. If you enjoyed the books that we're talking about and the creators that we're talking to, every month we pick a brand new book. The staff votes on it. It's a program that helps keep our store alive, and we'd love to have you as a member. You'll get a new book every month. Just follow that URL at the bottom of the screen.